Here's my question for each of you that's willing to comment. I think you heard Senator Murkowski and I both talking about the importance of working in a bipartisan way. That's what it's going to take in order to get anything done. And what I'd like is to, in effect, assess your views on one issue, and that is there a way to a natural gas policy where America can have it all? Economic growth, lower emissions, cheaper power, and reduced trade deficits certainly are what comes to mind. What would each of you recommend that the committee do in order to have it all? In effect, find that sweet spot where we can attain so many of these important objectives for the country. Why don't we start with you, Governor?
That's certainly no easy question. Again, I come back to the notion of regulation, appropriate regulation, and my own inclination, obviously being a governor and knowing that there are enough former governors up there, is that the states are the laboratory of democracy, and that we are focusing on how do we create a rigorous set of regulations that will be, I mean, we steal from each other every day. And I think the federal government, Lisa Jackson at EPA, has been a great partner with us in terms of trying to push us further and figure out where those sweet spots are using some of the technical expertise that she has had at her disposal. But I think that that's going to take a certain amount of time, although we should have our full regulatory environment together within by the end of this year. And at that point, we're still doing testing and measuring the air pollution issues and air quality around these large fields, trying to push our large companies to do less trucking back and forth, more pipeline transfers, to convert more of their diesel operations to be fueled with LNG. And one of the large exploration companies, Noble Energy in Colorado, they're based out of Houston, but they are now building their own LNG plant in Colorado so that they can sell it and run these operations in a more clean fashion.
If I can get some others in. Mr. Liveris.
Yep.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I mentioned the quadruple win. We believe that if the American public benefits and we get the benefit of jobs from exports and domestic manufacturing, America can be an energy and manufacturing superpower. All you have to do is follow the current law, the regulatory regime that exists, which is look at the public interest with each application, take a cautious approach. Our numbers suggest somewhere between 5 and 8 BCF a day should be what we see in this first little while we're in the 5th year of these great energy finds. I think we also have conversations around responsible regulations. We should have responsible supply. Responsible supply and making sure demand and supply don't get out of check like they did 10 years ago. We should not let the market, call it the speculators, call it Wall Street, call it the financial world, set the price domestically. Because as we all have seen, with commodities like oil, that price is set in the main by financial markets as much as real supply and demand. So there is a way to have it all, I believe.
Very good. We were just given a reprieve for 15 minutes, so we're going to go to 11:30, then we'll take a break. Mr. Eisenberg.
Thank you. I think this committee is taking a very thoughtful approach to the issue. I know this is not the first time this committee's had a hearing on the issue of LNG exports. I mean, you did this 14 months ago. You're taking a very thoughtful and cautious approach to trying to understand all of the challenges. If I could focus on one thing, it really would be permitting. In my written testimony, and I'll walk through it a little bit again, I talk about some of the hoops that you really have to jump through to actually get an LNG export facility up and running. So not only the DOE license is not the final hoop that they have to jump through here. They have to engage in very, very broad environmental review of their project, led by FERC. Compliance with NEPA requires the developer acquire the land and begin design and engineering plans. That takes about 2 years. Then NEPA requires the input of up to about 20 federal and state agencies, including the Army Corps for dredge and fill permits, which we know can be very controversial, a waterway suitability assessment from the U.S. Coast Guard, air permits from state and EPA agencies, and then the usual state and local construction permits. If they can somehow get through that and get a final EIS, then you can be sued for 6 years. If you can somehow get through that, then you have to get the long-term financing in place and get the contracts in place. Then when you get the contracts in place, then you have to go find $10 billion to build the facility. This is not an easy process. I really recommend to take on some real legislation to try to make the permitting process work faster.
Let's do this, Ms. Beinecke, and for each of you, understand the trade-offs, because if we all just go back to our position, then it's going to be hard to find the sweet spot. Ms. Beinecke.
Senator, I think that one of the key issues is how you gain public confidence. And I think having minimal federal standards and public disclosure of chemicals, right now they're in the 30 states in which fracking is occurring. There's only chemical disclosure in 14, and those states vary considerably. So in order for natural gas to provide the benefit that my colleagues on this panel have identified, you have to figure out how are you going to assure the public that their health and that their well-being is protected, and there need to be minimum federal standards that provide that, and they don't exist now.
Very good. Dr. Medlock.
Yes. Well, I actually second what Ms. Beinecke just said with regard to federal standards. The one place I think the federal government could actually have a very active role is in promoting transparency. I think that's something that is lacking, with the exception of a few states, where certain states have actually taken initiatives to make sure that transparency regulations are put in place. The other thing, and I'll kind of shift gears a little bit here, but I think that could really help benefit an all-of-the-above kind of outcome, is to allow markets to do what they do, what they've always done. They've actually resulted, as I mentioned in my testimony, in a very efficient natural gas market in this country. And it's hard to imagine anything that would be adopted that would disrupt that. But one thing that we need in this country that would really benefit not only the medium term but even the long term is the ability to store electricity. If we get to that point, it actually changes the entire landscape of the energy infrastructure in this country and would convey a lot of benefits associated with renewables, associated with natural gas, associated with nuclear power that we simply can't reap right now.
You're spot on storage. I'm over my time. Mr. Gerard, just if you...
I'll be brief. The first thing we can do is remember how we got to where we are today. In a very real way, we are today at a sweet spot. We got here because of market conditions, and the free market brought us to the point of $3 gas when it was $14 gas just 4 or 5 years ago. So the worst thing for us to do, and this is where I take strong exception with my good friend Andrew, is to get the government involved in trying to set the price and to control the market. The market will sort this out and find the equilibrium. We will, from that, benefit from improved environment with lower emissions, having low-cost, affordable natural gas. We'll generate 2 million jobs. We'll generate $2.5 trillion in revenue to the federal government, all while finding the opportunity to literally have it both ways in terms of exports and domestic production.
Very good.